Hello, my name is Rachel and I'm here today to fill my best books of the year so far. There are 10 books here. I've read 44 books, I think, so far this year. So this is... What is that dog doing? So I have 10 books here and I've read 44 books, I think, so far this year. So this is like just under a quarter of the books that I've read so far, which is pretty good for them being like books that I've really enjoyed. If I wanted to, I could have got this book down to 7 because there are 3 books that I sort of had issues with, but that I decided to put in this list anyway because I really enjoyed them and my enjoyment outweighed my problems with them. So I will tell you which ones those are when I mention them. So I split this video up into a few categories. So the first 2 books I have here are some rereads. So these were both 5 stars. One of them was not a 5-star when I first read it, so that was quite a surprise. And that is Carry On by Rowell. So the first time that I read this, I gave it 3.5 stars and I did have a lot of problems with it, I think. I don't know if I necessarily call them problems because I still remember adoring it, and I remember being like, I can't believe I've given a book that I like so much 3.5 stars. On reread, this is just an amazing book. It's so much better on a reread than it is the first time round. So I read this in June because I was reading all like LGBT plus fiction in June and I ended up giving it 5 stars. I listened to it on audiobook, which I would highly recommend the audiobook. It is phenomenal. And yeah, this is a story of Simon and Baz. They're a little bit like a Draco and a Harry type of relationship. However, I would say this is more a satire on Harry Potter than a direct copy of Harry Potter. So if you go into this scared, like that's one of the things, I went into this when I first read it scared that it was going to take the piss out of Harry Potter and that I wouldn't like that and that it would just copy it, and it doesn't do that at all. It's definitely a really good book in its own right, so would highly recommend this one. Gave this 5 stars. And then the other book, this is the 3rd time I've read this book, and to be honest, I really want to pick it up again already, and I finished it this month. So that's like a good recommendation for the book, but it doesn't really need any recommendation, to be honest, because it is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which everybody loves anyway. This reread of it, I listened to the Rosamund Pike audiobook, which was phenomenal. I really enjoyed. Every time I've reread this book, I have found something new that I focused on. So the first time I read it, obviously I had the normal like, oh my god, Darcy and Elizabeth, oh my god, Wickham's a dick, oh my god, like just the normal thoughts that you have when you read this book. And then the second time I reread it, which was last year, I found myself focusing a lot more on Bingley. Good things about Bingley, how they tie in so well to his character flaws, which I just think is just so well written and I enjoyed so much. So that was the second time, and then this time that I've reread it, I found myself focusing a lot on how much I did not like Jane because Jane is just too naive and too annoying when she keeps just being like, oh no, it's fine, I'm sure Wickham's changed, yeah, he's taken Lydia, but I'm sure he doesn't mean it. Like, just find that so annoying this time, and I found myself concentrating so much more on Mr. Bennet and the blame that can be put at his door as well. So yeah, every time I read this, there's something new going on and something new that I'm enjoying. So yeah, I feel like I'm just going to keep rereading this all the time at the moment because I've just enjoyed it so much. The next 2 books I have are graphic novels. So the first one is Follow Me In by Katrina Chapman, and this is the first book where if I'd wanted to, I could have cut this book from the list. But I didn't want to, and I didn't have to because it's my channel, I can do what I want. So this is a graphic memoir of Katrina Chapman's time on a travelling trip through Mexico with one of her ex-boyfriends, and this is not the happy book you think it's going to be. I mean, it doesn't necessarily look very happy, to be fair, but because it's about someone like backpacking through Mexico, I thought it was going to be quite a happy read. And although it is, we have moments where she discovers drawing again, which is something that she used to love doing and that she stopped doing. So you have these sketches that she made on the actual holiday that have kind of been put into the text, and that is a really great thing to read about. You also have pages like this where she will go into the history and the geography of the place that she's visiting, sometimes the food that's there as well, and it's just absolutely wonderful. But the thing that I loved as well is that there is this serious side. Her ex-boyfriend has some substance abuse issues, especially with alcohol. She herself has issues with like being able to speak up for herself, to say she's unhappy, to get out of that relationship. It's not that it's a relationship that is abusive, but it's a relationship where she feels undervalued and you know, she's not happy anymore. She doesn't love him, but she can't leave him. It's a very nuanced kind of description of that. I just really enjoyed it, and I think especially with graphic novels like this, I don't mind if they're not the best thing ever. I like being in them anyway. So this is one that I did absolutely adore, but I gave it 4 stars, and it isn't a favourite graphic novel for me. So it's kind of weird that it's in this list, but it is. Take from that what you will. And then the next graphic novel, I'm sure no one is surprised if they have seen my channel recently, because apparently I keep mentioning it in every bloody video, but it is Be Prepared by Vera Brosgal. I absolutely loved this graphic novel. It's one of my favourite graphic novels of all time, I think, and the more I pick it up, the more I'm like, why'd you give it 4 stars? You should have given it 5 stars. So maybe that's something that ends up happening. This is about a little girl who is Russian, and all of her friends keep going away to summer camps, and she doesn't have the money to go. One day she is at the Orthodox Russian church that she goes to, and one of the girls says that she goes to a Russian camp and the church helps you and subsidises you going to this camp because it's like a religious type of camp, I think. Like you learn a lot of Russian and things like that at the camp. So the church helps families out with sending their kids there. So she manages to convince her mum to send her and her brother to this camp, and she does not want to be there. Like the minute she's there, she realises, I don't want to be here. There is this green wash under all of the illustrations, and I love the illustrations. They are absolutely wonderful. And yeah, this is exactly what I like in a graphic novel. Like, it's quiet, it's like barely a story really. I mean, it is obviously a story, but I mean, like, in comparison to some other graphic novels you get where there's like all this stuff going on and all this plot, like it's very quiet and nothing happens in comparison to those. But that's exactly what I like in my graphic novels, and there is a lot of amazing character development in here, and it's just so cute and I love it. So I would highly recommend this. It is wonderful and definitely my favourite graphic novel that I've read so far this year. The next 2 books I have are both non-fiction books, which is quite a surprise. I always say I don't read a lot of non-fiction. Non-fiction is difficult for me to read. But this year, I think around like 20% of the books that I've read have been non-fiction. So that's quite good. This is also a non-fiction, and this is kind of a non-fiction. This is a bit like the Bell Jar is, like it's semi-autobiographical because she did go to a Russian camp, it says at the end. So yeah, I've been doing well with the non-fiction for someone who like always says that she's not good at non-fiction and she doesn't get along well with it. I've been doing well. So the next 2 are non-fictions. The first one is The Bling Ring by Nancy Jo Sales, and this is how a gang of fame-obsessed teens ripped off Hollywood and shocked the world. This is another one where I don't necessarily think this deserves to be in this list, but I feel like for the reading experience I had, it should be in this list. So I read this ridiculously quickly. I gobbled it up. It reads like when you're watching something like Gossip Girl, or like that sort of a show where you know it's trash as you're watching it, but you're like, I literally can't stop, I just want to know everything. That's what this book was. I wouldn't say it was a good book. I wouldn't say it's a good journalistic book at all. I don't think Nancy Jo Sales does the best job, and she goes into a lot of details that don't really need to be there, but she also does touch on some stuff that I find really, really interesting, like the difference between what children said they wanted to be in the 70s or the 50s and things like that, and what children say they want to be now, which, you know, in comparison are just things like, I want to be famous, which isn't really a job or an aspiration, but that's the thing that kids these days say that they want to be. There was a lot of stuff like that that I found really fascinating. But like I said, she goes into a lot of things that aren't as crucial, and it's a bit confusing why. This specifically, I've not even said what it's about. This is about the group of teenagers that went on a spree of robbing a lot of celebrity houses, I think around 2008, 2009. So they robbed people like Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton, Orlando Bloom, Rachel Bilson. It was when those celebrities were huge. They basically went in the houses and took like bags and clothes and perfumes, all stuff like that, and they would keep them and wear them, and it was kind of like they were celebrities because they had celebrity things on them. It's a very interesting like psychology of why these kids did what they did. So I think this book was fascinating. and the like situation itself is really interesting to read about, but I don't necessarily think that this book is a good book to read. But it has to be because I had a great reading experience with it and read it so fast and enjoyed it, kind of. I was really interested in it. So yeah, this is here, but again, take that as you will. I'm not really recommending it. And then the other non-fiction book on my list is What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Haruki Murakami. This is Haruki Murakami's kind of memoir, but specifically to do with his running. He does also talk a bit about writing in this. So I decided to read this because I picked up running a lot more after I came home from Switzerland, which has been really nice, and I wanted something that kind of talked about that, because I know like with writing, I like reading books about writing and it motivates me to write more. And so I was like, oh, I'll see if that works with running. And it did. This book really, really did motivate me. Murakami talks a lot about his relationship with running in this book, that he runs every day. I did try doing that. I ran every day for 10 days. We'll never do that again. That is not something that my body is capable of doing. All that happens is your legs get really, really tight, and then you go for a run and you feel like your legs are gonna snap. Like you can literally feel the muscles and tendons in your legs so tight that they are gonna snap. So that might be Murakami's way of running. It's never gonna be mine again. I did not enjoy that. But I did enjoy hearing his take on running, why he runs, when he runs, this relationship that he has with other people who run. One of the best things about this book is that he goes to Athens and he runs the original marathon, which was just fascinating. I love how he talks about how even though he is a prolific runner, he's been running pretty much all of his life. There's like a brief stint around his 20s, I think, where he doesn't run, but he picked it back up. Although he runs so much, although he loves it so much, he talks about how difficult it is. He talks about how when he runs a marathon, whatever he does, he gets 20 miles and he can't do it anymore, and he just wants to stop, and he can't remember why he likes running. He can only think about stopping, and he hates running at that time. And like, it was nice for someone who, even though he loves it so much, even though it's such a big part of his life, that he even talked about the things that he struggled with and the negatives and things like that. So that was absolutely fascinating, and it was really cool to hear about his life as well. I haven't read any of Murakami's fiction, but reading this definitely made me realise why some of the like criticisms that are made about Murakami's fiction, specifically that it's always set in a jazz bar. Murakami owned a jazz bar for like quite a few years, so it makes sense why a lot of his books are set there. I mean, I've not read any of them yet, but I enjoyed this one and I do want to read some of his fiction. And a lot of the criticism is just that his fiction books are like similar to each other, so I'm thinking if I just read one and then don't read another one for like 5 years, I probably won't notice that they're that similar. So that's the plan with Murakami. I am hoping to read some more of him because I did absolutely love this. I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars, either that or 4.5 stars. The next book that was one of my favourite books so far this year is the last book where I could have not put it in this list, and that is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. So I give this book 4 stars and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So this follows 2 boys, Rufus and Mateo, who meet on their last day. So in this story you can get a text at the start of the day that will say, you're gonna die today, live your best last day because you are going to die. And Rufus and Mateo meet on a app called Last Friends and basically spend their last day together. So I really loved this book. I loved the immediacy of it. I loved because it was happening over this 24-hour period, because obviously there's so much conflict going on with what the book is, like the premise itself. It really does keep you reading and it keeps you involved in the story. Also, the characters are very well developed, so I enjoyed that. It's not my favourite of Adam Silvera's books. I think my favourite is probably History Is All You Left Me, which I don't think I appreciated as much when I first read it, but upon looking back, I always think like, I really liked that book. I liked it a lot more than I realised when I read it, so it's one that I want to reread because obviously Rachel chats on about rereads all the time now. I absolutely adored this book and it's definitely one that I think I would reread, and the flood of emotions when I finished this book was ridiculous. Like, I was crying so much I couldn't look at the page. I remember just like swiping my eyes to try and be able to see the page. and I couldn't do that fast enough. Like, that was the situation I was in. So this is a very emotional book and I really enjoyed it. The next book I have will come as no surprise to anyone because I've been talking about it non-stop for the last 6 months. But it is What If It's Us by Silvera and Becky Albertalli. I adored this book. I read this book I think in January for the first time, and I reread it in like May or something. I reread it really soon after I'd first read it because I loved it so much that I just needed to read it again. This is about Ben and Arthur who meet in New York in the summer at the start. One of them has just had a breakup and one of them has moved to New York for the summer for like a summer internship, and yeah, we just follow them and their lives. And the thing that I loved about this book is that it's not a coming out story because everyone's already out. We have past relationships impacting new relationships, which is something that happens in the real world a lot, but something that doesn't happen very much in LGBT plus fiction that I read anyway, because you have things like Carry On where people come out, Aristotle and Dante where people come out, because of all these stories where someone comes to terms with their sexuality, which is fine, but it just means that there's never any impact of past relationships, which kind of bothers me. And so I was glad that this one did. I love this book. I love it. I love it so much. I love every cutesy moment. I love Arthur so much. I loved the side characters. The side characters are so well developed and really come off the page as characters, which is something that I really look for in a book. I will say that I didn't find characters did that in They Both Die at the end, and that is something that I really look for. I think because for me specifically, like in my real life, I'm so close to my friends and my best friend and stuff like that, that it just seems so unlikely when someone's life just revolves around the like romance plot and then they kind of like occasionally see their friends and, you know, they don't really care that much, they're not that much in the story. I really notice it because that isn't what life's like. So this didn't do that at all. The friends are such a huge part of this book, which is something else that I really enjoyed. I'm going to keep going on about this book forever because I just want to. So yeah, that's how I feel. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about this specific book that has just clicked with me. It's not one of those books where like everybody loves it, but for me it's just exactly what I need. So yeah, this is a book I'm going to read every time I'm sad, I think. The next 2 books I read on audiobook, so I don't have copies of. I definitely do want to get copies of them because I've loved them both so much. So hopefully, because I'm assuming they will both make it to my best books of 2019, so hopefully when I make that video I'll have physical copies to hold up. That would make me very happy. But yes, the first one differs greatly from all of these in that it is very sad and not a positive story in any way, shape or form. However, it is absolutely fantastic, and it is Almost Love by Louise O'Neil. So this is Louise O'Neil's first adult book that she's written. Usually she's written YA books, and in this book we follow a protagonist who is kind of lost in her life. She wanted to be an artist. They were sort of her goals in life. That didn't quite work out. She's ended up teaching art, and you can kind of tell that she's very disenfranchised with her life. She's also involved in really toxic relationships. It's done in such a beautiful way where she is in the most positive and lovely relationship currently in the story, but she has been in a past relationship that the book chronicles, telling us about that relationship, about them being together, and it wasn't even a proper relationship, but it was a very abusive relationship, not in terms of physically abusing someone, but in terms of like emotional, mental, like very manipulative kind of relationship. And because of that manipulation, it's kind of stayed in her head and it's something that she obsesses about, and so it really impacts her future relationships. There's things where like she'll talk about things that they did in the bedroom together that she didn't necessarily like, but she knew that he liked, so she'd do them with him. And then she talks like later about her current boyfriend and how she wishes he'd do those things, but she didn't even enjoy those things when she did them with the other guy. It's just this kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but it's this like emotional manipulation, like getting into someone's head. It's just absolutely fantastic. Like, it's so well done. Louise O'Neil really takes topics that are integral to talk about but that no one's talking about, and goes into so much detail about them, and I absolutely adore it. She did it with Asking for It, which was one of my favourite books of last year. We have the most unlikable main character, but that's just perfect, because you shouldn't need someone to be a likeable character to be able to sympathise with them being in a really horrible situation. Like, women don't have to be likeable for you to know that like they need help, or like, you know, she's just perfect. Louise O'Neil is perfect. I haven't read a book so far that I've had a proper criticism for. Like, I just absolutely love her books. And one of the things that I will say that worked so well, because she's coming from like a YA background, all her other books have been YA, and she writes it, I think it's first person present again, and because she does that, what you associate with YA, which is very like internal, obsession, melodramatic, like that sort of a vibe, she brings to this book, but it works so perfectly because we are focused with a character who's so inside her head, focusing on her memories, obsessed with a past relationship, obsessed with how other people respond to her and what they think of her and all that sort of stuff. So it just, those two like married together so well. And yeah, would just recommend Almost Love to anyone. It is so fantastic. I really need to pick up a copy of it. I loved it so much. I'm gonna have a little tea break before we go to number one, because I'm gonna word vomit a lot of love for number one. My favourite book of the year, I feel, is obvious. This might have broken into my favourite books of all time because I love it so much, so much. It is exactly the book that I needed when I was growing up, that I want to read in the future. It's where I want fiction to go. I just love it so much. So it is Just Juliet by Charlotte Reagan, which I know I've talked a lot about this year, and I'm sorry, but I can't stop talking about it. I read this book, I think in February or March, and I reread it during June when I was reading Pride books. And that is because I just wanted to be in that story again. And honestly, I think I will probably reread it again this year. In Just Juliet, we follow a girl called Lena, I think, and she is in school, and a new girl called Juliet moves to the school, and they develop a relationship together. It is a contemporary, I would say it's a female-female relationship version of like Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, in terms of the happy like vibes that you get from it and the acceptance you get from it. However, it's a lot better in my opinion. The side characters are phenomenal, like, oh my god, so good. The families are perfect. You have a family that struggles to accept someone who is coming out, and then you have a family that is completely accepting and were accepting when somebody was like 5 years old and came home and was like, I fancy this girl in my class, and the parents just immediately were like, okay, so we need to learn how to bring up a child as a lesbian, we need to learn how to, you know, have the birds and the bees talk, we need to do our research and all that sort of stuff, which is just, oh my god, so cute, so lovely, exactly what you would hope a parent would be. And so I loved that. And so it was nice because you did have a little bit of the negative, but you had the positive with it as well, so you got a really good view of both sides. We have a bisexual main character, which I loved because she is bisexual all the way through, and it's very much part of her identity that she is bisexual. She isn't shamed for being bisexual, which I loved. The amount of people you talk to when you were a girl and you talk to another girl who the minute they find out you're bisexual, like, oh, I'm gonna go now because you're not a lesbian. So fucking stupid, so stupid. Really annoys me. So I was really glad that in this book that didn't happen. We had someone who was a bisexual and she wasn't shamed for being bisexual, so loved that. We also have lesbian characters, gay characters, we have a female-female relationship, male-male relationship, which I loved the male-male relationship. It was so cute. We have some mental health rep in there as well for things like alcohol and drug abuse, self-harm and suicide. But those things are discussed more in a, these are struggles that people have gone through but been able to overcome. So it is done in a very positive way. I wouldn't say you needed to worry about being triggered specifically. So like, I've had self-harm problems before and I didn't feel triggered at all in this book, even slightly, because it's the person who has had those struggles is someone who's like completely overcome them and moved forward, that sort of a thing. So all of the things like that are kind of things from the past and not something that is current in the text, if you get my drift. The other thing that I loved about this book is that the ending is so perfect. It isn't exactly tied up with a ribbon, perfect ending that happens at the end of like contemporaries, which I liked because it was more believable, but it was still exactly what I wanted. So like, I got the best of both worlds. You get a little bit of the like, life isn't perfect, but then you get, but life is perfect. So that was great. That was exactly what I wanted. The audiobook is fantastic. I do need a physical copy though, and I just love it. This is exactly the book that I needed when I was a kid. We have so many people navigating like their sexuality, but done in such a beautiful way and done in such a supportive way. No one's forced to come out in this book. There's so many books where people are forced to come out, blackmailed to come out, all that sort of stuff. And like, it's nice to just have people, they're just given time in the text to navigate their sexuality and decide on their own. That's lovely. That's because that's exactly what people want in their real lives, is to just figure it out on their own. That is just Juliet. I'm gonna make myself stop talking because I feel like I could just keep talking forever about that book because it means a lot to me at the moment and I love it so much, and I will reread it again this year, probably when I go on holiday, because it makes me so happy. So these are my favourite books of the year so far, barring Just Juliet and Almost Love, which I will definitely need to pick up physical copies of because I adore them. Let me know what your favourite books of the year are thus far. I am going to go and film my worst books of the year now, which is less happy. It's a less happy zone. I should have filmed that one first and then I could be left with the positive. But anyway, thank you very much for watching and I will see you in my next video. Bye!